Today, we want to present to you two very special people. So, I'd like to present to you and introduce to everybody Sean Yang. Why was English training so important to you?
My first reason is very simple because I plan one day I go to America for treat my disease.
Hello and welcome to Crossover. I'm Yi Xu in Beijing, and once again by my side is the wonderful Tianran He.
Thank you. I'm always very excited to be here.
Now, you know, Tianran, a lot of times here in Crossover, we talk about things that are very lighthearted. We have a lot of demonstrations in the studio.
That's why you asked me to come here.
But today we want to present to you two very special people. We're going to get a little serious today because these two people were faced with some very serious challenges. And after these challenges, they've overcome them, and they're now using their experience by trying to improve the world around them.
Right.
Really, truly inspiring stories. So I'd like to present to you and introduce to everybody Sean Yang.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you,
Thank
Sean.
you for coming, Sean.
Nice to meet you.
Sean, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your disease?
Okay, actually my disease, I think that is a dramatic story for me because I have been misdiagnosed for 20 years.
A misdiagnosis for 20 years?
So
Yeah.
Since what age?
I think around when I was 8 years old, I was diagnosed with DMD, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And actually, I re-diagnosed until 2014. And, you know, that I re-diagnosed with genetic testing. And that result, I have LGMD2E.
Okay.
And that's a very rare form of muscular dystrophy.
Yes, LGMD2E it's a very rare incidence. That's about 1 in 25 million people affected by that.
So I mean, even in the world, there are very few people with the same condition as you, let alone China.
Yeah, about 300 people in the world
Wow.
have LGMD2Es.
I want to take you back to when you were a child. You said you were diagnosed when you were 8 years old.
Yeah.
Before that, you were like any other Chinese child growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah? So how did you start knowing that something might be wrong?
Okay, I think for me, I just used to my condition because I remember when I realized I had a disease, in that time my symptom was very light. Just when I was run faster and I'm easy to fall down. Just like that. So I still can walking and still do a lot of things, but just when I running, I have a challenge.
You would get dizzy. It was like fatigue.
Yeah.
Right.
And your muscles would just fail and you would fall.
Yeah.
You brought a photo album of when you were a child.
Wow.
You're so cute. Look
Oh,
at
that's
these.
fantastic. I have totally the same sort of photos at home. Okay, so what sort of ages were you at in these photos?
I think in this about 2 or 3. Yeah.
So we're gonna flip through. Such a happy child. There's your mother and your father. So proud, so handsome.
Older when you were 3 or 4?
So a little bit. So that I mean the airplane that one.
This one.
So in that time, I already feel some difference. Yeah.
Would you feel the sensation in your legs?
No, just when I running or go upstairs, I will moving slowly.
Right.
Other kids, they can run to the upstairs. I cannot.
Right.
I just step by step.
So this was almost 30 years ago because you're 36 years old now.
Yeah.
So this was almost 30 years ago. So you started seeing doctors. What were the doctors telling you at that time?
Actually, I think doctor didn't tell me anything because I noticed the most of the information by my mom. Right. You know, because I remember when I was maybe like 8 years old, and I go shopping with my mom. I saw a young man in a wheelchair, and I asked my mom why that man cannot walk, and she told me maybe he got very serious sick and cannot be walked. But my mom mentioned you got sick as well. Maybe one day you cannot be walked.
Right.
So she was preparing you.
Yeah.
That one day you would probably be in a wheelchair.
Yeah. Actually, she told me everything that I may facing today. In that time, I just, maybe. But my mom always say, if you cooperate and be positive, maybe can change.
Right.
Yeah.
And back then, the doctor said that you only had a certain amount of years left. But obviously, you've beaten that. You've obviously shown them wrong. How did you feel when you got that prognosis? What was it like for you?
Oh wow, this is very hard to say. Actually, you know, I felt my life without length. You know, after I passed 18, every years I felt, I got new life, because I don't know how long I can be.
Right. Every year you felt like you were beating the disease.
Right.
Yeah.
But actually, later on I realized, because you know, I find actually everyone is the same, because we all living in the moment that we can feel. That even for you and me, and there is no and tomorrow, because yesterday already passed, and tomorrow maybe may not come.
So you're living in the present.
Yeah, everyone.
Yes, we all live in the present.
Yeah.
Every day has so much meaning.
So tell me, at some point you couldn't go to school anymore, but I mean, look at you, Sean. You speak English fluently. Can't say that for every Chinese person.
Sure.
You're very intelligent. You're very articulate. How did you educate yourself if you were in school?
Yeah, and because of my condition, I stopped my study when I was maybe around 9. So in that time I was in the grade 4, and I studied learning the encyclopedia.
You read the encyclopedia?
Yeah.
From A to Z?
Yeah.
I can't
That's
say
amazing.
I can't think of anyone who's ever done that.
But it's interesting, you know, and because it's more interesting than the textbook.
Sure.
Because I can, you know, find what I'm interested in and to reading that.
What interested you the most?
Later philosophy and psychology and biology.
And what made you keep going? You know, I'm sure you had to continue to do your exercises and...
You mean what gave me my power?
Yeah, where did that drive come from to keep, you know, keep going, keep educating yourself, keep being better and better? Because I'm guessing that there are a lot of people who might be depressed. They hear about the disease, they feel depressed, they may not, you know, they kind of give up. But it seems like it only made you want to do more.
I think if you like asking me that, I will thanks my mom first, because when I was very young, and my mom always, you know, trained me, and you need to facing you challenges. You cannot give up, and so the life, maybe right now you cannot do, you cannot run, and you're just sitting in a wheelchair, but you still can thinking.
Right.
So you still can experience the world and the life.
How about your English? Hey, how did you learn your English? Because I heard you actually came in 3rd place for the CCTV English Cup back in 2005 or something like that.
Yeah.
Where did the English training come from?
Most time I study by myself, and then also I have an English partner from Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you communicate with your partner?
Through internet. Yeah.
Through Skype?
No Skype. In that time, we use Yahoo Messenger.
Right.
Yeah. Yahoo Message. And she teach me English. I teach her Chinese.
And how is her Chinese now?
So.
Not as
And because for me, and every time before I chat with her, I say today maybe we need talking about the travel. So I will prepare a lot of words, and then talk to her. And but for her, maybe she didn't prepare a lot.
right.
Why was English training so important to you?
So I think for learning English, my first reason is very simple. I plan one day I go to America for treat my disease. So in that time, I think if I can speak English, I don't need to get translator.
Right.
Yeah, that's a very simple reason.
It'll save some costs too.
He has a tremendous amount of determination.
I love the fact that Sean is so incredibly goal. Very few people in life know exactly what they want to do at X time in their life.
Exactly. And from this English training, you started a company a while back. No longer exists, but you started a company because you wanted to teach English to other disabled persons.
Right.
Can you tell us why you wanted to do this?
Because I feel most disabled people, they don't have a good opportunity, have a good education. So, and I see a lot, disabled person. And for example, because I did training 3 blind students, they cannot see.
Sure.
And when I first met them, I say, "What do you want to do in the future? What do you want to be in the future?" They just say, "Maybe I can be a massage sifu."
A masseuse.
Yeah, masseuse. Right. Yeah. I think, no, you still can do other things. And then the kid said, "No, for me, I only can do that." So in that time, I say, "No, I can teach you English. Then you can go to UK to study and change your life."
I'm so impressed. I mean, there are able-bodied individuals who would not even think about doing as much as you have accomplished. I really think that's so inspiring. Sure. Sean, you mentioned before that a lot of this motivation and the drive comes from your mother.
Yeah.
We went and we interviewed your mother. As you know, we went to your house and we tried to see what your daily life was about and what your mom had to say. Let's take a look.
当时看病原因就是因为他爱摔跟头，就在学校里边一块跑步，跑着跑着摔跟头了，当时我们就觉得是什么缺钙呀、缺锌啊什么的，所以说给他看一看，需要补一补。结果一查，说可能是这个病。当时杨硕得这病以后，因为大夫也明确的说，就是活不到成年，就到15、16岁。当时不光是好朋友问这事儿，当时我们单位的那些领导还专门找我们谈过这个事儿，说如果你们想再要一个孩子，可以批准，可以要。这个事儿呢，我们也很认真的坐下来商量了一下，我们俩的想法是一致的，最后一致是不能再要孩子了。说的，因为当时都是独生子女，我们当时杨硕还并不知道他这个病就彻底没有希望了。我是说的，杨硕也很聪明，如果说我们再要一个孩子，实际上就是告诉了杨硕，他就放弃他了，他就没有治了，就这意思。所以当时我们说的那个就要这一个孩子。杨硕这样骄傲的，我觉得杨硕能够接受了现实，而且积极面对。他不像有些病人或什么的埋怨什么的。我曾经不止一次跟杨硕说过，我说杨硕，我说你怨妈妈，恨我吗？我有时候我多少次我后悔，我说我要知道孩子有病，我就不会要这个孩子，因为作为父母，作为自己来讲受苦受累，我觉得因为是自己的孩子是应该的，但杨硕要承受了好多，他承受了很多这个痛苦嘛。我跟他说过几次问这事儿，但是杨硕的回答让我特别感动。杨硕跟我说：“妈妈，你别那什么，你别难过，我一点都不恨你， 你带到我这个世界上，如果你不生我，我都不知道这能到这世界上。说你不管怎么样，到了这个世界上，给了我生命，来到这世界上。
Your mother and your father's love, they decided they're only going to have this one child. They're going to focus all the effort on you. And
You want to give me power.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
Let me feel I still have a love.
Yes, absolutely. A mother's love is very powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a father's love, of course.
Sure.
I also want to read something. This is your mother's diary.
Yeah.
And she shared with us something. And I'm going to read it in Chinese, and then I'm going to...
Oh, go you.
I'm going to try to read it in Chinese, and then I'm going to translate it. Here we go. 每每想起儿子，内心总是阵痛。儿子患病身残，是我人生最大的不幸。但儿子的乐观向上、自强不息，又是我人生最大的骄傲。
You did really well.
It's probably the first time I've ever read something in Chinese in crossover, but it's definitely worth me putting my Chinese out there. Your mother says every day when she thinks about you, she has a heartache. Your disability is her life's loss and misfortune, but your optimism and your unrelentless strength is also her greatest pride.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you could see the relationship
For sure.
is so strong. She's an amazing woman, very lucky.
And I want to ask too, there was another lady in the video taking care of you too.
Yeah.
What is your relationship with her?
My wife.
Your wife, yes, let's invite your wife, Chi Chi, onto the studio stage. Come on, Chi Chi.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
So, Chi Chi, you've been with Sean for over a decade now, right?
Yeah.
About 10 years. How would you describe Sean as a person?
Oh, that is a good question. In my mind, he is very strong and optimistic and clever and cute and romantic man. I think that
Romantic. You're romantic too, Sean.
I wrote poetry to her.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. You wrote poetry even when you were a child.
Not child,
but-
about 18 years old.
Chinese poetry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Chinese poetry.
And so you write love poems to her?
Yeah, my wife.
To your wife, right?
Yeah.
To Chi Chi.
I wanted to ask,
Yeah.
how did you two meet?
She's my helper. She take care of me,
Right.
like a nurse helper. Yeah.
Well, not much has changed.
So Chi Chi, I know you spend all your time with Sean, and there are people outside the community who they don't really understand people with disabilities. What would you like to tell people about persons with disabilities?
I think I want to tell them is there is not different. I think they just need our little bit more take care of in their life. Even we are healthy, we do need help, but maybe in some situation we also need help too. So more important is just not treat them they are special people. They are not different. They just the same. Just maybe just need a little bit more help.
Right.
Yeah.
And
just
maybe a different kind of help. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody needs,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, just maybe the situation is different. They need help is different.
Yeah.
I think.
Sean, you're surrounded by some amazing women
Yeah.
who are propping you up and helping you achieve your
I
mission.
think the most important is she treat me just like other people. And I think this is very important because if I like people surround me very nervous and very sensitive, nobody will be like me.
Sure.
Yeah, how do you want people to treat you? You don't want to be treated in a special way.
Yeah,
You want to be treated like any other person.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Because otherwise it must be so stressful to kind of, have to walk around the subject.
Yeah.
Like you're walking on eggshells. It's
Right.
tiring.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sean, you've started your own business. You've started your own NGO.
Yeah.
You've taught English. You're fluent in English. But I know recently you started a new job too.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Your eyes just lit up.
Yeah, I got a new job at LIH Olivias Place. And this company actually provides a universal and multidisciplinary high quality rehabilitation service to children and adults.
Wow.
And in this point, I think if I work here, I also help a lot of people.
Right.
You know, yeah.
And why is it personally so gratifying for you to work for, I mean, you started your own business.
Yeah.
Why is it so important for you to work for another company?
Actually, I want to prove myself. You know, for LIH Olivias Place, and this company is an international company and have more than 300 employees. So I think if I can work here, that I can prove I have ability to be there.
So Sean, your new company has a very unique mission and vision here in China. After this short break, the founder of LIH Olivia's Place is going to join us. Nelson Chow himself has a very unique story to share. But before we go to break, Chi-Chi, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you,
Yes,
too.
and of course, thank you for everything that you do for Sean.
Okay, thank you.
All right, please stay with us.
Welcome back to Crossover. We're joined by Nelson. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
You are the founder of Olivia's Place. Can you tell us a little bit about your company? What does it do?
Yeah, so our company was founded with a mission to try to bring about high quality, evidence-based, universal type rehab services for all the people of China.
Okay. And when did Sean come into all of this?
So Sean came in probably about in the fall of last year, so probably
Yeah.
September of last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what were your impressions when you first met Sean?
Oh, I thought he was great. I mean, I remember meeting him, and I remember that I thought he was very intelligent, and I thought that he was also he was a very strong advocate for a lot of people with disabilities, and he was a wonderful role model as well. And I do remember one thing he told me that that really sticks in my mind, and that's that he had said to me, he said, "Do not treat me any differently from anyone else."
Yes, right.
And
During the training.
right, during
Yeah,
the
during
training,
the training.
exactly. So I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about Olivia's Place. So the name is very unique. Is there a story behind it?
Right. So Olivia is my daughter, and she was born 8 years ago with Down syndrome.
Okay.
And so we named the company after her.
Can you bring us back to because at that time you did not have Olivia's Place, obviously. Olivia's, what were you doing at that time? And tell us about the birth of your daughter.
So at that time, you know, I'm not from this area. At that time, I was actually, my background is in semiconductor engineering.
Wow.
So,
That is very different.
Yes, it's quite different now. And when Olivia was born, it was actually our first exposure into what it was like for children with disabilities. And I remember, you know, the day she was born, I remember the first thing that happened was, you know, about 10 minutes after she was born, the nurses came over and they were, you know, they ran around and then they basically didn't know how to tell me. And they basically said, you know, we have a strong suspicion that your daughter may have Down syndrome.
This was in Shanghai.
This is in Shanghai. So she was born in Shanghai. So, you know, my wife had just gone through a very tough labor, and then she ended up having to have a C-section. So they were actually so worried. I guess this news is so devastating that they were so worried that with that news, she may never recover. So they basically told me not to tell her anything. Right.
How did you feel when you were given that prognosis?
Yeah. So of course I had, you know, of course it was a very emotional time, right? Because it was just the birth of my first child as well. So it was actually quite interesting to hear that because, you know, I did tell of course I did
You
tell
told her right away.
Right, exactly, because I can't withhold that kind of news,
Yeah.
right? And so that was actually very interesting because that was actually the first exposure. But then the second exposure to what it was like actually came very soon after. And with Down syndrome, it's you have to do genetic testing to actually confirm that she actually has that. So normally it takes a few days to do a test. But in our case, it actually took 6 weeks. And of course, the 6 weeks passed. And at that time, you know, they told us in 6 weeks, you know, we're eagerly expecting the news. And at that time, they came to us and they basically said, oh, that first sample never made it. We're going to have to take another blood sample, and we had to wait another 6 weeks.
Why did that happen?
It's just because they don't have the support structure to help and to identify that as well. So it ended up taking about 3 months before we actually knew that she actually had Down
And what were you
syndrome.
doing during those 3 months?
Yeah, so of course during that time was it was very difficult actually for us because we didn't have a confirmed diagnosis. And I think that's the hardest part, right? Because all of it affects the future of our daughter, and it affects what she's going to be able to do later on. And we're just hoping that she maybe didn't have it, or she had a more mild condition.
And so that's where the therapy comes in.
Correct.
But from what I understand at that time, you couldn't find the right therapy that you were looking for her in Shanghai.
Correct.
This was back in 2007.
Right. In 2007, it's like China was at the very incipient phases of a lot of their rehab services and their therapy. So therefore, at that time, we actually couldn't find a lot of what we needed for her. We searched around for about a year and a half, and ultimately we decided that if she wasn't getting the services that she needed here, maybe we should go and find those services.
So tell us what you did. You went back to the UN.
Right.
You did a lot of research there.
Yes, I did.
You quit your job. No, you didn't quit your job. You took
a leave of absence. I took a long leave of absence because I really wanted to understand what my daughter needed. And I basically, I took a leave of absence, and of course in the United States there's a lot of support for someone like my daughter.
Right.
So we enrolled her in early intervention programs and in all various types of therapy as well. And so I was actually my wife and I attended all of the sessions in an effort to learn what she needed and to understand what these services were that we couldn't get in China.
Was there no option to go back to the States?
Yes.
He did go back to the
yes.
States. Yeah.
Permanently.
Yes. There was definitely an option to stay permanent, and of course that was the preferred choice, right? But my company at that time was really interested in having me come back to China, right? So my wife and I discussed at that point, and we thought, well, maybe we can go back to China. We'll go for short term, another 2 years. Right. Now we understand what services she might need. Maybe we can cobble together some services for her, and maybe find a few therapists and maybe allow them to work together in a interdisciplinary manner so that we could provide the kind of support that my daughter actually needed.
So when you say interdisciplinary, what do you mean there?
Right.
What does that encompass?
So interdisciplinary basically encompasses all the different support services that a child may need and working together. So the idea is that if many of the types of services that you might provide to a child, for example, occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, psychological support, and perhaps learning support. A lot of these different areas, if you work together as a team to identify the goals and objectives for the child, and you decide which clinician can actually help in a better manner, then actually it's much more effective.
Right.
So could you find those? All of those therapists here in China?
No, actually, that was actually quite difficult. When we came back, we actually couldn't find a lot of those. And in fact, when we came back to China, we couldn't find any. So it made us start to question our decision of whether coming back to China was the right move. So my daughter actually had no therapy for a few months. And that's where the idea came from. So we thought at that time, well, if she's not getting these types of services, then we have several options. Well, we can go back to the United States.
Right.
Or in other things, we could try to do something about it and try to help our daughter in this capacity.
I wanted to ask, before you founded Olivia's Place, what did other Chinese parents do?
Right. So typically, and it's definitely changing right now, but traditionally, what would happen was that if you had a child with a disability or with special needs, actually you wouldn't have access to many of these services.
Right.
So once you don't have access to services, and particularly you don't have access to schooling, and when that happens, then it actually limits everything you can do going forward.
Well, maybe we should ask Sean that, amongst what sort of resources are available for people with disabilities in terms of healthcare?
Well, it's still very limited in China. Yeah, but one thing I can see is the wheelchair access is better than before.
Right.
Yeah, I would like to see maybe in Beijing, 80% Republic building have that.
Right.
And also for the disabled people, if I go to see movie and when park, it's half price.
Yeah.
That is a plus. That is definitely a good benefit.
It's half price. Yeah.
You know, I've got to say, judging from disability access in Beijing, it's way ahead of London, because there are so many underground stations in London that just have endless stairs, and everyone gets tired walking up and down them. But in Beijing, they have great access.
Right.
And of course,
although I
half-price
hear it's a
tickets.
little bit different in the second-tier cities when you get out of the bigger cities. Nelson, when you first opened Olivia's Place, so here's your vision of having multidisciplinary therapy. What was the reception, you know, by the community? You know, did you have a lot of parents seeking you out for help? What was the demand for the services?
Yeah, so there's definitely a need for this type of service in the community, and I think it's really is a matter of educating the population about the service, that there is a service available for them, and it's not the end of the world like I'd experienced, like the nurses had sort of expressed when my daughter was born, right? So I think the whole education part of it is a strong thing of a strong part of what we do actually, is because by giving the education, it allows everyone to understand what this service is. And allows them to understand that they can actually help their child.
So you're saying that currently, you know, like maybe Chinese parents say if they had a child with cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, they wouldn't even know that they can have this type of early intervention that you're speaking of.
Correct, because they don't have exposure and they're not educated on the types of services that might be available.
Right.
And comes in.
Right,
As
exactly.
your business development manager.
Right, exactly. And that's why Sean can be such a strong advocate of what we do as well.
So your approach is very, like you said, multidisciplinary. A child might see an occupational therapist, a physical therapist. This is all something that I've heard of in the U.S., but again, what's the state of this type of therapy? Is this very cutting edge for China?
Well, for China, it's a new type of service, right? I mean, traditionally, this field is very much at its infancy right now. So in that sense, there needs to be a lot of education about this, and there needs to be the education of clinicians who can actually help in doing this. And I think that's one of the things that at LIH Olivia's Place right now, we're actually facing a lot of, is actually finding a lot of the clinicians that we need in order to do this type of service, and to help develop that in China, and to help bring about change in that.
How are you finding these people?
So we do it in many ways. One is that we bring aboard people who are actually trained in this area, and what we do is we give them additional training, for example. And so we might develop them in certain areas. But then at the same time, we also can work with universities, for example, to help bring about extra training and to help influence some of what's being taught there as well. So there's multiple ways that we can actually go about and try to find the clinicians that we need.
Sean, I'm curious, how did you hear about Olivia's Place? You know, and what was your reaction? You know, somebody who has had a disability all of, you know, since you were a young child. You know, and when you heard about this idea, what was your reaction?
I think for Olivia's Place, and can bring a hope to China, and also to bring the high quality services to China, because in China they have some rehabilitation services, but the quality is not very high, you know.
I want to take us back to Olivia, your daughter. She's 8 years old now. Where is she now?
Yes, Olivia is a very happy 8-year-old right now. I mean, she attends school right now. And right now, developmentally, I think, you know, it's like with a lot of the therapy that, you know, through our organization's therapy services, she actually gets a lot of what she needs right now through us. So therefore, it's wonderful to be able to see how actually support her to actually reach her potential. Because that's really what we're trying to do, is that every person has a potential they should be able to reach.
Right.
And we're really trying to unlock that potential in every child.
And Olivia has a little brother.
Yes, that is correct. So little brother is Peyton, and he's 6 years old right now.
Okay.
Right.
All right. When we come back, we're going to hear more about rehabilitation services here in China. Please stay tuned. So you want other people to duplicate this?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, that's strongly in our mission. We're really trying to bring this about and to really bring up the level of rehab services in China. When my daughter became school age, there was no real school system that would accept her. So we actually had to open up our own school.
And welcome back to Crossover. So Nelson, before the break, you were talking about how the mission or the vision for your company is to provide this multidisciplinary rehabilitation service for children and for adults. But how do you make that universal?
So that's actually a very interesting question, because a lot of the people at LIH, Olivias Place and LIH all ask me, how are we going to reach this? And we have such a big vision mission. And basically, the way I look at it is, I think the way to do it is to not, for example, no matter how many, for example, hospitals and clinics you build out, I don't think that's the way you can get there, because even if you build out hundreds of them, there's still thousands of other cities in China where you're not providing universal type high quality services. Right? So I think so we feel that the way to really influence this is to actually to do it on 3 different levels, and I call them, within the organization, I'm calling them the know-hows, right? It's building out these know-hows, and then therefore through the know-hows we can help bring about and to get to what we want to try to do, right? And in particular, one of them is clearly the clinical, meaning both the medical and the therapy knowledge and the management of that knowledge. So I think that's that's number 1.
Okay, so how are you going to, I guess in some ways, spread that knowledge?
Right, so basically, the idea is that with that, together with number 2, which is the training aspect of it, which we touched on earlier, is how do we train a lot of these clinicians, and how do you get the level of the clinicians, together with how do you actually bring together the operations and the processes that's needed to actually ensure that we have good quality, that we actually are scalable, that we actually have good health outcomes and things like that. The 3 of them put together is basically, the idea is to actually provide this set so that everyone can start using those, and to provide it as a model, so that we can use that as a model for other organizations to help use, so that they can actually help duplicate it as well.
So you want other people to duplicate this?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, that's strongly in our mission, of we're really trying to bring this about and to really bring up of rehab services in China, and the way to do it is
So it's almost like open source rehabilitation
correct.
I was going to say, this is definitely from your engineering background.
Right.
Yes, that is correct. and the idea is, like, if people ask, it's like, it's like, if they come over to us and say, hey, we would like to use a lot of what you have, can we copy what you do? We'd be more than happy to help them. In fact, we would like them to copy us even better, because that's how you ensure that you can actually get this quality type service that will eventually can become universal.
And what's the 3rd know-how?
Oh, so
I was remembering that.
Yeah,
One,
you're
2, 3.
paying
Actually very good.
attention. You were a good student.
The 3rd one is, that I just briefly touched on, is basically the operations and the processes. It's basically, and that, again, from a lot of my background, is how do you actually make something repeatable? Because in order to ensure health outcomes and quality health outcomes, you actually have to have a system, a process in place that guarantees you always do the same things over and over, and you always handle certain situations the right way, and then you learn from those as well. You learn from the mistakes that we all make as well.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, because you can have as many doctors and clinicians and therapists, but if you can't manage them and you can't replicate,
you can't replicate,
then
exactly,
it's not effective.
Exactly, and it's not effective, and then they might use a lot of what you do, but it may not be a quality service that they provide.
I think when I was doing a little bit of research for this episode, and we talked about persons with disability in China, one of the biggest components that people say is lacking is the area when it comes in, and you touched upon it, is education. What happens when somebody becomes disabled or is born with a disability? How do we include them in the educational system in China? How would you evaluate or assess the current situation for education?
I think right now it's getting better than before. Yeah, because right now, if you want to go to university, they cannot refuse you if you're disabled. But they have one rules is you must be able to take care of yourself. Okay. If you cannot take care of yourself, it's still a challenge for you to go to school.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because for the school system, they don't have a people or additional system to provide the services for the disabled.
Right.
Sure. They're not as inclusive as of yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Correct.
How is it done in the States or?
Yeah, so in the States, there's a concept called inclusive education, where children with, especially these children with disabilities, actually all have the right to an education. And so what they end up doing is they include them together with mainstream children, for example, so that both groups of children learn from each other as well, and they all learn together.
Is this with or without helpers and minders?
Yes, it actually includes help, and then you would have the support infrastructure in order to help the child do their best in school. So, for example, going back to the example that Sean just gave, if you're not able to get into the school, then they'll have helpers or they'll have facilities to help you get into school.
Right.
Right. And if you're a child that needs additional support, and let's say therapy support or learning support or things like that, then they could help provide that as well.
Is that the majority of schools in the States or just a select few?
Yeah, so the majority of public schools in the United States would provide this type of service.
But in China, we have schools, you know, for example, you might have a school that's specifically for the blind, and you have teachers who are trained to educate children who are blind or adults who are blind. Is that not where we want to go? We want to go towards inclusive education, or?
I think it's definitely the model that we're going for, because the whole idea behind this is to actually, you know, to be members of society. I think it's very important to start at the beginning when you're in school, because the school is actually an emulation of what society would look like, right? And I think so. I feel it's very important that within school they start getting exposure, and all the different groups of students actually get exposure to one another, because that mimics what real life is going to look like.
Right. Is that starting to happen in China? Are people thinking about it? Are agencies thinking about that? This type of inclusive education model?
Things start.
What are things like for your daughter? You said she's studying here in China.
Right.
She's 8 years old.
You're right. So that's actually a very interesting question. So that actually, you know, we were faced with the exact same problem of when my daughter became school-aged. There was no real school system that would accept her. We had to open up our own school, in fact.
You opened your own school for your
Yes.
daughter? Wow.
We
It
opened
really
up our
is
own
Olivia's
school,
Place.
and it was an inclusive school called Shine Academy.
Okay.
And now it's been absorbed we've absorbed it into LIH, Olivia's Place. So there's a learning center within our organization that helps provide education for children.
And how many children are enrolled?
So we depending on the time frame, but with various capacities, we had right now we probably have less than a dozen right now.
Okay.
But this is something that we also feel is a strong part of what we should be supporting as well.
Very inspiring and impactful words. So much,
You're
Sean.
welcome.
Thank you so much, Nelson, for joining
you.
us today.
Thank you for having us.
And thanks to our viewers at home for tuning in. We'll see you next weekend on Crossover. Bye for now.